Humanity had always believed that the stars held hope, a future waiting to be claimed. Colonies were built on distant worlds, trade routes stretched across the void, and humanity felt as though it was finally stepping into its golden age. But that dream had been shattered when the alien coalition arrived. They were not one species, but many, bound together by old alliances and shared greed. To them, Earth was nothing but another resource-rich world, another people to bend under their rule. At first, humans resisted bravely. Fleets launched from Earth and Mars fought with every ounce of strength they had. Soldiers stood on barren moons and strange planets, defending colonies that were still young and fragile. But the coalition had technology far ahead of anything humans could build. Their ships were faster, their weapons more precise, and their numbers far greater. Every battle cost humanity dearly, and though sometimes a victory was won, it was always followed by 3 defeats. Months turned into years, and the war ground on like a storm with no end. Human admirals sat in dimly lit command rooms, staring at maps filled with red markers. Each one a system lost, a world abandoned, a fleet destroyed. They gave orders they hated. Retreat, evacuate, surrender this ground so another line could be held a little longer. Behind them, politicians on Earth argued endlessly. Some called for negotiations, even if it meant bending the knee. Others demanded more resistance, though they could not explain where the ships, weapons, or soldiers would come from. On the colonies, life was harder still. Families watched the skies every night, praying that the next fleet of alien warships would pass them by. On the mining colonies of the asteroid belt, workers listened to news broadcasts in silence, afraid to hear the name of a settlement they knew being listed among the fallen. On far-off frontier worlds, where communication came late, settlers often learned of their doom when alien dropships appeared in the sky without warning. Among the soldiers, hope was fading quickly. Pilots climbed into their cockpits with the bitter knowledge that they might not return. Yet they went anyway because if they did not, there would be no one left to fight. Young men and women who had joined the defense forces dreaming of heroism now fought only to protect the person beside them. Entire squadrons vanished in minutes when they encountered alien cruisers, and those who survived often carried scars, both seen and unseen. The worst part was not just the fighting, but the knowledge that humanity was running out of time. Shipyards worked endlessly, but human industry could not match the coalition's vast machine. Every new battleship launched by Earth was countered by 10 from the enemy. Scientists worked frantically to upgrade weapons and shields, but progress was slow, and breakthroughs came too late to save the fleets already lost. Even the bravest leaders could see the truth written clearly before them. Humanity was being bled dry. Whispers spread through the ranks of officers and soldiers alike. Some wondered aloud if surrender might not be the wiser path. Others refused to consider it, saying that surrender would mean slavery or extermination. Yet, in their quiet moments, even the fiercest warriors admitted they did not know how long they could keep going. The coalition's war machine was unstoppable, and every day, the human defense line was pushed closer to Earth. The coalition, for its part, grew confident. Their commanders believed humanity was already broken, and the final strikes would be little more than formality. Reports from their spies spoke of food shortages, of riots on colony worlds, of crumbling morale in human fleets. The coalition's admirals prepared for one last campaign, a decisive strike that would crush Earth itself and end the war once and for all. Back on Earth, people tried to live normal lives, but even in the great cities, the war was never far away. Posters urged enlistment. Factories worked day and night, their chimneys blackening the skies. Families rationed food and fuel, and many sent sons and daughters to the front lines, not knowing if they would ever return. Some children grew up never knowing peace, their lullabies replaced by the sound of sirens and the distant thunder of weapons in orbit. And yet, despite everything, humanity still clung to survival. There were victories, small and desperate, that gave people reason to hope. A convoy of ships reaching a starving colony. A fighter squadron holding off an enemy cruiser just long enough for civilians to escape. These stories traveled like sparks in the darkness, whispered from one person to another, reminding them that even if defeat seemed certain, humanity had not yet fallen. But everyone knew the truth. The war could not go on much longer. Humanity was stretched to the edge of exhaustion. Resources were nearly gone. Entire fleets had been destroyed. One more crushing defeat, one more decisive blow, and Earth itself would fall. The war was at its breaking point, and the future of humankind hung by a single thread. It was in this fragile, desperate moment that the first strange signals appeared, faint distortions out in the void. At first, they were dismissed as sensor errors or strange radiation from dying stars. No one could have guessed that these signals would herald the arrival of something no one expected. Something that would change the war forever. The alien coalition had grown bold. For years, they had tested humanity's strength, striking colony after colony, tearing apart fleets that tried to stand against them. Now they no longer saw humanity as a threat at all. To them, it was only a matter of time before the last defenses collapsed and Earth itself fell. Their commanders gathered their armadas for what they called the final campaign, the strike that would end human resistance forever. Across the stars, alien ships moved with purpose. Massive carriers, bristling with weapons, slid out of dry docks and fell into formation. Swarms of smaller craft joined them, scouts, interceptors, and bombers, all ready to carve through whatever human ships dared to block their path. The fleets were so large they darkened suns as they passed, blocking out light with walls of steel and firepower. To those watching from the ground, the sight was terrifying. It looked less like an army and more like a tide of destruction. The coalition's confidence came not only from numbers, but from arrogance. They had crushed countless civilizations before, bending weaker species to their will, and they saw humanity as no different. To them, this war was not a struggle but a routine conquest. Reports from their spies only encouraged this view. They heard of human shortages, of tired fleets, of frightened soldiers who fought with desperation but lacked the strength to win. They believed the humans had no hidden tricks left, no miracles waiting to turn the tide. The war was theirs to finish. Human commanders, meanwhile, knew what was coming. Intelligence units tracked the massive fleet forming at the edge of known space, and they understood the scale of the attack that was about to fall on them. They prepared as best they could, but the truth was clear. The human fleets were too small, too battered, and too scattered to face the full force of the coalition head-on. Orders were given to regroup at key strongholds, to make one last defense where it might count. Every available ship, from heavy cruisers to converted freighters armed with makeshift cannons, was called to join the line. On one of those strongholds, a heavily defended system not far from Earth, soldiers prepared themselves for the storm. Spaceports buzzed with activity as crews rushed to repair damaged ships, refuel fighters, and load supplies. On the ground, anti-orbital cannons were tested again and again, their operators praying they would not fail when the enemy came. Civilians who had not yet been evacuated looked to the skies with fear, waiting for the day when alien warships would appear above their homes. The system had become a fortress, but even the strongest fortress could be broken if the enemy was powerful enough. Among the soldiers, there was no illusion about what awaited them. Many believed they were marching to their deaths, yet they did not turn away. Pilots strapped into fighters with steady hands, knowing they might never land again. Engineers patched hulls with whatever scraps they could find, determined to give their comrades a fighting chance. Captains addressed their crews with words of courage, telling them that even if they fell, humanity would remember their sacrifice. There was a grim acceptance in the air, but also a fire. If this was to be humanity's end, then it would not come quietly. As the days passed, the tension grew heavier. Human scouts sent into deep space reported the enemy fleets growing larger, their movements like storm clouds rolling toward the horizon. Command centers buzzed with constant updates, maps shifting with new red markers as alien task forces pushed closer. There was no doubt anymore. The coalition was coming for the stronghold, and they meant to crush it with everything they had. The coalition admirals spoke confidently among themselves. To them, the human defense was already broken. They would strike the stronghold, sweep away whatever ships dared resist, and then drive straight for Earth. Their victory speeches were already being prepared. Some even argued over how best to divide humanity's remaining worlds once the war was done. That was the level of their certainty, They believed the battle was already won before the first shot was fired. For the people living through those days, time seemed to slow. Every hour felt stretched, every moment weighed down by dread. Mothers clutched their children tightly. Fathers whispered promises they knew they might not keep. Soldiers tried to joke with each other, hiding their fear behind forced laughter. Commanders walked the decks of their ships in silence, their minds heavy with strategies they knew might not be enough. The universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the clash that was about to erupt. And yet, even in this moment of despair, humanity did not completely give in. Small acts of defiance burned like sparks in the darkness. A crew painted their ship's hull with messages of defiance, daring the enemy to come. A pilot carried a photo of her family, swearing she would see them again, no matter the odds. An engineer carved the words "for Earth" into the metal of a cannon, as if the weapon itself could remember why it fired. These moments were small, almost invisible compared to the massive scale of the war, but they mattered. They reminded everyone that even if humanity stood at the edge of destruction, it still had a spirit that could not be easily broken. As the coalition fleets closed in, humanity braced itself. Generals knew the odds. Soldiers felt the weight of what was coming. Civilians prayed for survival. The skies were quiet for now, but everyone could feel the storm gathering just beyond the horizon. And in that silence, no one yet knew that something else was watching. Something hidden. Something waiting. The arrival of the enemy's advance would not only bring destruction, but also reveal a force that neither side expected, one that would change the course of the war forever. The great fleets of the alien coalition moved like a storm through the stars, their warships filling the void in endless lines. Humanity's defenders were ready, waiting in silence at the stronghold system. Their ships battered and few in number but prepared to fight until the very end. Both sides knew the clash was coming. The only question was how long humanity could endure before the coalition crushed them. Yet, just as the battle seemed set, something strange began to happen. It started quietly. At first, it was nothing more than a faint reading on a single human scout ship's sensors. A tiny distortion, like a ripple across still water. The officer at the console frowned, tapping the display again and again. He thought it was an error, maybe interference from nearby stars, maybe a malfunction in the ship's aging equipment. But the ripple did not fade. It grew. He reported it back to command, unsure of what he had found. Soon, other ships picked up the same disturbance. A flicker in space, a shadow that should not exist. On the tactical screens, it looked like a blur, a patch of darkness where nothing should be. Human scientists tried to explain it, suggesting it might be gravitational waves or remnants of a collapsed star. But the distortion moved in a way no natural phenomenon ever had. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. The alien coalition noticed it too. Their fleets slowed, scanning the region carefully. To them, it was a curiosity, not a threat. Their commanders dismissed it as background noise, perhaps a quirk of human sensors being too primitive to understand what they were seeing. But as the readings grew stronger, even the coalition's analysts grew uneasy. The distortion was close, too close, and it was moving toward the battlefield. Back on the human flagship, the atmosphere grew tense. Admirals and officers crowded around glowing screens, watching as the anomaly strengthened with each passing minute. Some whispered it was a new alien weapon, a secret the coalition had kept hidden until now. Others feared it was the beginning of a natural disaster, something vast and cosmic that could tear them apart before the battle even began. The truth was no one knew, and the not knowing made it worse. On the colony below, civilians felt nothing of the distortion, but they could see the worry spreading among soldiers and commanders. Rumors traveled faster than orders. Some said a wormhole was opening, that reinforcements from another alien empire were about to arrive. Others claimed it was the awakening of some ancient machine buried in the stars. Fear turned into wild stories, each one more frightening than the last. Out in the void, the anomaly became undeniable. What had once been a ripple grew into a wound in space, a shimmering curtain that twisted light and bent shadows. Both human and alien fleets held their positions, their guns ready but unmoving, as they watched the impossible unfold before them. Ships that passed too close reported malfunctions. Communications breaking up, sensors going blind, engines faltering as though some invisible hand reached out and touched them. For long moments, the battlefield was silent. Neither side dared to make the first move. Human captains gripped their command chairs tightly, waiting for orders that did not come. Alien commanders hissed and growled in their native tongues, confused but unwilling to show fear. The war had paused, not by choice, but by something greater, something unknown. Then suddenly the distortion flared. Light rippled outward in silent waves, and space itself seemed to tear open. From the heart of the anomaly, a shadow began to emerge. At first, it looked like nothing more than a jagged outline, a faint silhouette too large to be measured. Slowly, it grew clearer until every ship in the system could see it. Something was stepping out of the void. The unknown vessel revealed itself piece by piece, massive structures unfolding as if it had been wrapped in darkness and was only now peeling free. Its hull was black, but not the black of space. It was darker, as though it absorbed light itself. Its shape was alien, unlike any design known to human engineers or coalition architects. Spires and angles jutted from its frame, strange symbols glowed faintly across its surface, and weapons larger than battleships themselves glimmered in the dark. Gasps filled command decks across both fleets. No one recognized it. Not the humans, not the coalition. It belonged to no flag, no empire. It was something entirely other. Its sheer size dwarfed even the largest coalition carriers, casting shadows across nearby ships like a predator towering over prey. Human officers tried to hail it, sending wave after wave of signals. Greetings, warnings, desperate pleas. Nothing came back. The alien commanders tried the same in their own languages, their voices sharp with both pride and unease. Still, the ship remained silent. It hung there in the void like a ghost, watching, waiting. Fear spread quickly. Among the human crews, whispers filled the air. Was this a savior, arriving to turn the tide of battle? Or was it a new enemy, one even worse than the coalition? Among the aliens, pride began to crack. Their leaders told themselves it was nothing, just another enemy to crush. Yet in their hearts, doubt crept in. This was no ordinary ship. This was something built for war beyond their understanding. The battlefield was frozen. Thousands of ships, both human and alien, floated in tense stillness as the unknown vessel finished its emergence. Engines hummed, weapons glowed, but no one fired the first shot. Every eye, every scanner, every mind was fixed on the dark giant that had stepped into their war. And then, as the silence stretched longer and longer, a thought began to form in the hearts of all who watched. Whatever this ship was, its arrival was no accident. It had come with purpose. The only question was whose side it was on, and what price would be paid when it finally moved. The vast shadow that had emerged from the distortion now stood revealed in the cold silence of space. It was no longer a blur or a flicker of strange readings. It was real, massive, and terrifying. Both human and alien fleets stared at it, their scanners working furiously, their crews whispering in awe and fear. The ship was like nothing they had ever seen before. Its hull stretched for kilometers, so large that even the biggest alien battleships looked small beside it. The surface was not smooth like human designs, nor polished like the coalition's shining war machines. Instead, it looked alive, as though the metal itself had grown into twisted patterns and sharp angles. Strange glowing lines ran across its body, pulsing faintly like veins of light under dark skin. Every curve and corner seemed built with purpose, but a purpose no one could understand. From its sides jutted spires that looked like towers, each one large enough to hold entire fleets of smaller ships. What appeared to be weapons dotted its frame, enormous cannons, missile bays, and structures so alien that human and alien tacticians alike could not even guess their function. The longer people looked at it, the more unsettling it became, as if it was not simply a ship but a predator disguised as one, studying everything around it in silence. On the human flagship, officers scrambled to read the incoming data. "It's bigger than anything in our records," one whispered. "Twice the size of their dreadnoughts. Maybe 3 times. Another muttered, "It's not theirs. It can't be theirs." Yet no one could say whose it was. Humanity had never built such a vessel, and the coalition swore by their silence that it was not theirs either. That left one possibility. It belonged to someone else entirely, an unknown power stepping onto the battlefield. Across the coalition command ships, unease spread quickly. Their leaders were arrogant, but even arrogance falters in the face of the unknown. Some barked orders to prepare weapons, claiming the intruder must be destroyed at once. Others hesitated, worried that a rash attack might reveal a power too great to fight. If one ship this size had appeared, could there be more hiding just beyond the edge of their sensors? The thought gnawed at them like poison. For long minutes the vessel made no move. It simply floated there, silent and watchful. Human captains sent hails again and again, their voices trembling as they tried different frequencies, different languages, anything that might reach it. The coalition did the same, though their messages carried more threats than questions. Still no reply came. The ship remained as it was, dark, silent, and waiting. Among the human crew's emotions twisted. Some dared to believe this was salvation, that a mysterious ally had arrived at the perfect moment to save them from destruction. They whispered that maybe it was a remnant of some lost civilization, awakened now to fight beside humanity. Others felt only dread, fearing that if this ship turned hostile, nothing in existence could stop it. Hope and fear battled inside every heart. The coalition ships, once so confident, now showed cracks of doubt. Their fleets edged back ever so slightly, captains whispering to each other, wondering if their weapons would even scratch the monster that stood before them. Their leaders reminded them that they were conquerors, that they had crushed many empires before. But this was different. This was unknown. And the unknown always carried fear. As the minutes stretched, the tension thickened. Gun crews on both sides sat with fingers hovering over triggers. Pilots waited in cockpits, sweat dripping down their faces, ready to launch but terrified of what they might face. The silence of the great ship was worse than any battle, because silence meant choice, and no one knew which choice it would make. Then, small details began to reveal themselves. Panels on the ship's surface shifted, opening and closing like breathing lungs. The glowing veins of light pulsed brighter, as if energy was flowing through its vast body. Sensors detected power surging, weapons charging, systems coming online. It was no longer a passive shadow. It was waking up. Alarms rang across the human fleet. Admirals shouted for shields to be raised, for formations to tighten. The coalition did the same, barking orders in panic, their calm confidence gone. Both sides prepared for the unknown strike they feared was coming. The battlefield became a coil of nerves, ready to snap with the first shot. Through all of this, the ship remained silent. No communication, no signal of intent. Only power building, systems humming, weapons glowing faintly in the darkness. It was as if the giant was considering its options, deciding whether the fleets before it were prey to be destroyed, allies to be saved, or simply irrelevant in its own greater mission. A human captain whispered words that echoed the thoughts of many. "It doesn't care about us. Not yet. It's watching." That was perhaps the most terrifying truth. This vessel, so much larger and more advanced than anything else in the system, seemed to view the human and alien fleets as little more than ants circling below. And yet it had revealed itself. It had chosen this moment, this battlefield, this war. Whatever its purpose was, it was not by chance. The humans and the coalition both realized the same thing in that moment. Their war, which had felt like the center of the galaxy, might now be nothing more than a small part of something far greater. The unknown ship hung in the void, silent but alive, its presence heavier than any weapon. Both sides, once enemies, now shared the same fear, that their fates no longer belonged to them. With one decision, one single move, the ship could decide the outcome of not only the battle but perhaps the war itself. And as it finished revealing its terrible shape, everyone, human and alien alike, understood that the future of the galaxy had just shifted. The unknown ship floated in the middle of the battlefield, silent and unmoving. Its black surface gleamed faintly with pulsing lines of light, and its strange weapons seemed alive, like predators waiting to strike. Every eye, human and alien, was locked onto it. No one moved, no one dared to fire. The silence was heavy, almost unbearable, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. On the human flagship, officers worked frantically. Messages were still being sent toward the ship, each one bouncing back with nothing but static. They tried every frequency, every code, even bursts of old languages once used in space exploration. Nothing. The vessel gave no sign of hearing them, no hint of care. It simply hovered, vast and watchful, like a god deciding the fate of mortals. The coalition ships were no less uneasy. Their commanders barked orders, but their voices carried cracks of doubt. They, too, tried to hail the vessel. Some demanded it identify itself. Others issued threats, promising swift destruction if it interfered. But the only answer was silence. Silence and the low hum of power building inside the colossal warship. Among the human crews, fear and hope tangled together. Some whispered that this had to be an ally, that no enemy would have appeared in such a moment. Others shook their heads, pointing to the ship's size, its weapons, its unnatural aura. "That's not here to save us," one soldier murmured. "That's here to finish us all." The uncertainty was worse than open battle. At least in a fight you knew where you stood. But now no one did. The coalition's arrogance began to falter. For so long they had been certain of victory. Now they hesitated, their fleets holding back, their ships spreading into cautious formations. No admiral wanted to be the first to test their strength against the unknown. Even the smallest mistake could mean the end of their fleet. Pride was still in their words, but fear was in their movements. Time dragged on. Minutes felt like hours. Engines hummed quietly, shields glowed, weapons charged, but still no one fired. Pilots sat strapped into their cockpits, sweat trickling down their faces, waiting for orders they dreaded and craved at the same time. On the ground below, civilians stared at the sky, watching the silent shape drifting above the stars, unaware of what decision it would make. The silence grew heavier with every heartbeat. It was not peace. It was the weight of a blade hanging above, ready to fall. The unknown ship was not passive. It was studying, calculating. Panels shifted across its surface. Light patterns rippled across its frame, as if it were waking fully from a long sleep. The message was clear. It was alive and it was preparing. In the human fleet, debates raged quietly. Some admirals argued they should attack first, while there was still a chance to strike. Others insisted that attacking something they did not understand would be suicide. Orders were restrained, but nerves were stretched to the breaking point. One wrong move, one spark, and the entire system would ignite into chaos. The coalition felt the same tension. Their leaders had conquered countless civilizations, but none of those victories had begun with a ship like this. Their fleets were vast, their weapons many, but even their bravest captains hesitated. To shoot first might mean waking a beast too powerful to control. To wait too long might mean being caught unprepared when it struck. It was a prison of fear, and the chains grew tighter with every passing second. A strange quiet settled over the crews. Men and women who had trained their entire lives for war found themselves staring at their screens, holding their breath, waiting for the unknown. The ordinary sounds of battle, explosions, orders, screams, were missing. In their place was silence so deep it pressed on the chest like a weight. The battlefield was frozen, not by peace, but by dread. Somewhere among the humans, a young pilot whispered a prayer, clutching a photo of her family before sliding it back into her pocket. On a coalition cruiser, a commander snarled at his crew to be ready, but his hands trembled against the console. Across ships and fleets, both sides shared something they had never shared before: fear of the same enemy. And yet, for a few moments there was something else too. For the first time in the war, the humans and the coalition were united in their stillness. They were enemies, sworn to destroy one another. But now they stood side by side in their silence, powerless before something greater than them both. It was as though the galaxy itself had reminded them how small they truly were. The unknown ship gave no clue of its intentions. No banner, no signal, no words. It could have been friend, it could have been foe, or it could have been something that cared nothing for either side. That uncertainty made every second unbearable. Every captain, human and alien, knew the truth. When it moved, everything would change. And then, as the silence stretched into eternity, a shift occurred. The glowing veins along its surface pulsed brighter, faster. Its towers rotated, its massive cannons adjusted, its engines hummed with a rising power. The great ship was no longer waiting. It was preparing. Something was about to happen. A cold shiver ran through every soul in the system. The silence had lasted long enough. The fire was coming. The silence broke in an instant. Without warning, the unknown ship came alive. The glowing lines across its hull burned brighter than before, spreading like rivers of fire across the black surface. Its weapons, silent and still only moments ago, roared to life. Massive cannons rotated into position, and strange structures unfolded from its sides, humming with energy that no scanner could understand. The air in every command deck grew heavy as crews realized the waiting was over. Then the first strike came. A blinding beam of light erupted from the ship's main cannon, cutting through space like a sword. It struck a coalition cruiser that had been holding position near the front of their fleet. For a single second, the cruiser remained whole, its shields glowing as they tried to hold. Then, with a soundless explosion, it was gone, ripped apart as though it had never existed. The battlefield froze in shock. Humanity's soldiers gasped, their eyes wide. Coalition commanders shouted in disbelief. Their ships had some of the strongest shields in the galaxy, and yet this unknown weapon had torn through them as if they were paper. Before the shock could fade, the unknown ship fired again. This time, it unleashed a volley of glowing projectiles that moved faster than any missile the humans had ever built. They slammed into a formation of alien battleships, exploding with bursts of light so bright they blinded sensors. When the glare cleared, what had been a proud line of warships was nothing but drifting wreckage. The coalition fleet, once unstoppable, was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Panic rippled through the aliens. Their admirals shouted frantic orders, telling their ships to scatter, to return fire, to do anything to stop the devastation. Beams and missiles launched back at the giant vessel, filling the void with streaks of energy. Explosions erupted against the ship's dark hull, but when the light faded, it remained untouched. Its shields, or perhaps something beyond shields, absorbed everything without effort. To the aliens, it was as if they were throwing stones at a mountain. The humans watched in stunned silence. For years they had fought and bled against the coalition, suffering defeat after defeat. They had believed the aliens were invincible, that their technology was too advanced to ever be matched. Now, before their eyes, those same aliens were being torn apart with ease. For the first time, humanity saw the coalition not as gods of war, but as prey. The unknown ship continued its assault, each shot precise and merciless. It targeted the largest vessels first, dismantling carriers and dreadnoughts that had once brought terror to entire systems. Alien pilots screamed as their ships vanished in flashes of light. Commanders who had once spoken with arrogance now begged their crews to hold together, their voices cracking with fear. The coalition fleet was unraveling, and nothing they did could stop it. Among the humans, hope sparked like fire. Officers leaned forward, their voices rising with disbelief and joy. "It's helping us," someone shouted. Pilots cheered inside their cockpits, gripping their controls tighter. Crews who had been prepared to die now dared to believe they might live. The unknown ship was not attacking them. It was tearing through their enemy. But along with hope came unease. The humans did not understand why the ship fought against the coalition. Was it truly an ally? Or was the destruction simply part of some larger plan? No one knew. The only clear truth was this. In a single moment, the war had shifted. Humanity was no longer facing death alone. Something far more powerful had entered the fight. The coalition's formation collapsed as ships scattered in every direction. Some tried to regroup, but the unknown vessel was too fast, its weapons striking with terrifying accuracy. Others attempted to flee, their engines burning at full power, but few escaped. Each time a ship broke away, the dark giant tracked it, destroying it before it could run. The battlefield that had once been filled with the proud banners of the coalition was now littered with wreckage and flame. The humans seized their chance. Admirals shouted for their fleets to advance, their voices full of energy they had not felt in years. "Push forward," they cried. "Strike now." Fighters launched in waves, cruisers surged ahead, and every human weapon that could fire joined the chaos. Together, with the unknown ship leading the charge, they turned the battlefield into a storm of light and destruction. For the first time since the war had begun, the coalition was not the predator. They were the hunted. Their ships twisted in desperation, trying to escape the relentless assault, but there was no safety. Every maneuver was countered, every defense broken. The humans struck with fury, avenging years of defeat, while the unknown ship delivered destruction with cold precision. On the ground, civilians watching from below wept and cheered at the same time. They saw the sky light up with explosions and knew something impossible was happening. For once, the enemy was burning, not them. Families hugged one another tightly, daring to hope that survival was more than just a dream. But even as victory began to take shape, one truth remained in everyone's mind. This victory did not belong to humanity alone. It belonged to the mysterious ship, the dark giant that had emerged from the void. Without it, humanity would already be ash and ruins. Its power was beyond anything they could have imagined. And while they cheered its help, they also feared its silence. The coalition was broken, scattered, humiliated. The battle was theirs no longer. Yet as the last of the enemy ships exploded into fragments, humanity's eyes returned to the unknown vessel. It had destroyed their enemies, but it had never spoken, never explained itself, never told them why. It hovered still in the void, silent and terrifying, as if deciding what to do next. The first strike had come. The enemy had fallen. And now the galaxy waited to see if the giant's guns would turn toward humanity, or away into the darkness once more. The battlefield was quiet after the storm. Wreckage floated in the void, broken ships drifting with fires still burning across their twisted hulls. The coalition fleet, once so proud and powerful, had been shattered into pieces. Their commanders were dead, their soldiers fleeing in panic, and their once perfect formations reduced to chaos. For humanity, this moment felt like waking from a nightmare. For years, the war had only brought defeat after defeat. Now, for the first time, the enemy was on the run. But amid the silence, all eyes turned to the massive dark ship that had made this victory possible. It hovered still, glowing faintly with the strange light that pulsed across its hull. No signal came from it, no words, no explanation. The humans could not tell if it was a savior, a weapon, or something else entirely. And yet, because of it, humanity still breathed. On every human warship, there was a change in the air. Where once there had been despair and exhaustion, now there was fire. Soldiers who had expected to die that day now looked at one another with new strength in their eyes. Pilots clenched their fists and shouted with triumph. Captains who had once felt the crushing weight of impossible odds stood taller on their bridges. Humanity had seen the coalition bleed, and that changed everything. Admiral Reyes, commanding the Terran fleet, stood at the center of her bridge. Her eyes were locked on the unknown ship. She felt both gratitude and fear, her heart torn between the two. Without that vessel, they would have been destroyed. But she could not ignore the question in her mind. Why had it helped them? And what did it want? Still, she knew one thing with certainty. This was humanity's chance. They could not waste it. She turned to her officers, her voice strong. The enemy has broken. Their morale is shattered. We must strike while the fire is in us. This is no longer about survival. It is about reclaiming our place in the stars. Her words carried across the fleet, repeated through comms, passed from ship to ship. Humanity rises, the cry went out. For Earth, for our future. Crews roared in reply, their voices full of passion. The despair that had weighed them down was gone, replaced by determination. They had been given a second chance, and they would not let it slip away. The coalition survivors were retreating, scattering across the void. Some fled into hyperspace, abandoning the fight entirely. Others tried to regroup, but their formations collapsed before they could reform. Humanity's fleet surged forward, chasing them with a fury that had long been suppressed. Fighters darted between the wreckage, striking at damaged enemy ships. Cruisers and destroyers fired volley after volley, determined to make the aliens pay for every life they had taken. It was not just vengeance. It was something greater. For the first time, humanity was fighting not out of desperation, but out of belief. They believed they could win, and that belief spread like fire. On Earth, news of the battle traveled faster than light. Civilians who had spent years living in fear of bombardment cheered in the streets when they heard the coalition was retreating. Families that had lost everything still wept, but their tears were mixed with hope. Factories doubled their work, volunteers lined up to serve, and scientists pushed themselves harder, inspired by the dream that victory was possible. The unknown ship had given them more than survival. It had given them the spark to rise again. In space, humanity's admirals began to rethink everything. For so long, their strategies had been defensive, focused only on slowing the coalition's advance. Now, for the first time, they spoke of offense. They marked star systems on their maps, systems they had lost long ago, and dared to imagine taking them back. The galaxy had seen humans as weak, but that image was burning away. The unknown ship remained silent, watching. Some humans wondered if it would leave, vanishing into the darkness as mysteriously as it had come. Others feared it might turn its weapons on them once the coalition was finished. But no matter the uncertainty, one truth was clear. The tide had turned, and humanity was standing again. Soldiers gathered in their ships, speaking of the battle with fire in their voices. "Did you see it?" one pilot asked, eyes wide. "That ship cut through them like nothing. The coalition couldn't even touch it." Others nodded, but one soldier replied quietly, "Maybe it doesn't matter what that ship is. Maybe what matters is that we fought beside it. And now we know we can win." Everywhere, this new belief spread. Fear still lingered, yes, but it no longer controlled them. The coalition had bled, the galaxy had witnessed it, and humanity had survived. Their enemies had been forced to retreat, and that knowledge would echo far beyond the battlefield. Other alien empires, who had once ignored Earth as weak and doomed, would now see them differently. Humanity was no longer prey. They were survivors, warriors, and perhaps something more. Admiral Reyes looked again at the unknown ship. In her heart, she whispered a silent vow. "Whatever you are, wherever you came from, you gave us this chance. And we will not waste it. Humanity will rise, with or without you." The stars burned bright around the battlefield. The wreckage of enemies floated as silent proof of what had happened. The unknown ship's dark shape loomed, unmoving, a mystery that refused to reveal itself. But humanity did not need the answers yet. What they needed, they had already been given: the strength to stand, the courage to fight, and the belief that their war was not over. In that moment, humanity was reforged. Not as a desperate people clinging to survival, but as warriors who had seen the impossible and chosen to rise. They were no longer on the edge of defeat. They were ready to fight for every world, every life, every dream. And this time, the galaxy would remember them not as victims, but as a force that could not be broken. The war was far from over, but humanity's stand had begun anew. The battlefield had fallen into silence. Fires still burned on shattered wreckage, drifting endlessly in the void, but the war cries and thunder of weapons were gone. Humanity had survived, and the coalition was broken, for now. Yet even as the Terran fleet celebrated its first great victory, there was one presence that no one could ignore: the unknown ship. It floated above the remains of the enemy, its vast hull hidden in shadows, glowing faintly with strange lights that pulsed like the heartbeat of something alive. No one knew its origin. No signal came from it, no message, no explanation for why it had entered the war at all. It had appeared, struck with unstoppable force, and now it lingered silently, like a giant watching from afar. On Admiral Reyes's flagship, the mood was divided. Her officers whispered in low voices, glancing at the screens where the unknown ship was displayed. Some felt awe and gratitude. "Without it, we'd be dead," one muttered. Others spoke with unease. "It's too powerful. If it turns on us, there won't be anything left." The Admiral herself stood quietly, staring at the dark vessel, her mind heavy with questions. She had fought wars long enough to know that power always came with a price. The question was, what price would humanity be forced to pay? Across the fleet, soldiers and civilians alike debated the same questions. Pilots who had seen the ship's weapons tear through the coalition swore they had never witnessed such destructive precision. Engineers studied the battle records, shaking their heads at technology far beyond anything human science could explain. Some even wondered if the ship was not a machine at all, but a living thing, a weapon born from some ancient race long forgotten. And yet, despite the fear, there was also hope. For the first time, humanity had not been alone. Something or someone had chosen to stand beside them. Whether it was friend or foe was uncertain, but its actions had saved billions of lives. For those who had been living under the shadow of extinction, that was enough to cling to. Days passed after the battle, and still the ship did not move. It remained in orbit above the ruined battlefield, silent, unmoving, as though observing. The coalition dared not return. Scouts reported that alien fleets had pulled back, regrouping far from human territory, unwilling to challenge whatever force now stood with Earth. Rumors spread quickly across the galaxy. Some said the humans had unlocked an ancient superweapon buried in their world. Others believed a forgotten empire had returned, choosing humanity as its ally. And there were those who whispered in fear that the unknown ship was only the beginning, that more of its kind would come. On Earth, celebrations turned to questions. News channels showed endless images of the mysterious vessel, calling it both savior and threat. Scientists argued on broadcasts, each with their own theories. Was it alien? Was it human built in secret? Or something far stranger? Religious leaders declared it a sign, proof that destiny itself had chosen humanity to rise. Children pointed at the skies at night, dreaming of the dark guardian that had saved them. Yet Admiral Reyes could not celebrate. She had requested direct communication, sending message after message across every known frequency. None were answered. She ordered probes to scan the ship, but their signals returned nothing useful. The ship's hull seemed to swallow every attempt, as if refusing to be understood. It gave them silence, and in that silence was both comfort and terror. One night, as Reyes stood alone in her quarters, she replayed the footage of the battle again and again. The unknown ship moved with intelligence, striking only at the coalition, never once targeting human vessels. That meant it had chosen a side, at least for now. But why? She whispered to herself, "What do you want from us?" Of course, no answer came. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the soldiers. Some swore they saw movement across the ship's surface, shapes that looked like shadows crawling across its hull. Others claimed they had heard faint signals buried in static, voices, speaking in languages no one could understand. Fear mixed with fascination, creating an atmosphere of mystery that wrapped around every human heart. Weeks passed, and still the ship remained. Humanity began to rebuild, fueled by new determination. Factories worked day and night, new warships rolled out, and armies trained harder than ever before. But always, above them, the unknown ship watched. It became a symbol, painted onto walls and carried as a mark of resistance. To some, it was a guardian angel. To others, it was a warning power that could turn against them at any moment. And then, one day, the ship moved. Slowly, with a grace that defied its massive size, it turned away from the battlefield. Engines that glowed like dying stars came to life, and it began to drift toward the black unknown of deep space. The fleet held its breath, watching, waiting to see if it would speak at last. Admiral Reyes ordered all comms channels open, her voice calm but desperate as she called out, "This is Admiral Reyes of the Terran fleet. If you hear me, if you understand me, thank you. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you want." The ship did not answer. It kept moving, steady and silent, its lights pulsing faintly as though alive. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it vanished into the stars. The fleet was left in silence once more. Some officers cheered, believing the ship had served its purpose and departed. Others felt an emptiness, a haunting sense that something greater had only just begun. Admiral Reyes stood on her bridge, her heart heavy. Humanity had been saved, but not by its own strength. Somewhere in the galaxy the unknown still watched, and though it had left, she knew it would return. For good or for ill, humanity's war was no longer theirs alone. They had been noticed, they had been chosen, and now the galaxy would never be the same.